Chapter 5. A Spirited Boy. During Mardi Gras in 1913, something happened in Stargorod that scandalized the city's more progressive circles. On Thursday night, the Cabaret Salve was hosting a grand show in its lavishly decorated halls. The world-famous troupe of jugglers, the 10 Arabs, the greatest phenomenon of the 20th century, Steen, mysterious, incomprehensible, outrageous, Steen the man of mystery, the amazing Spanish acrobats, the Inés, Brezina the diva from Paris's Folies Berger, the Draffer sisters, and many more acts. The Draffer sisters, there were 3 of them, darted around the tiny stage, whose backdrop was painted to look like Versailles, and sang with a Volga accent. Here we are like little birds, flitting about with ease. The crowd applauds us. High society is thrilled. After this verse, the sisters shuddered, joined hands, and as the piano accompaniment swelled, belted out the chorus. We flutter. We know no tears. Everyone knows us. The smart and the fools alike. The Draffer trio's wild dancing and dazzling smiles had absolutely no effect on Stargorod's elite. This crowd, represented at the cabaret by City Councilman Charishnikov and his cousin, the first guild merchant Angelov, already tipsy and flanked by 2 cousins in pale dresses, the city architect, the town doctor, 3 landowners, and many less notable folks with and without cousins, sent the Draffer sisters off with funereal claps and returned to the joys of their family-style gala dinner with mum champagne green label, 2 rubles a head. On the tables, in special little holders made of white metal by the Frage brothers, sat enticing blue menus. Their contents, which filled Merchant Angelov with a heavy, drunken boredom, were absolutely enchanting and exotic to a young man of about 17, sitting right by the stage with a not-so-young, very mature cousin. The young man read the menu again: pike perch à la popiet, roast chicken, lightly salted cucumber, Jean dark ice soufflé, mum champagne green label. For the ladies, fresh flowers. He did some mental math only he understood and timidly ordered dinner for 2. But half an hour later, the young man was in tears as old waiter Peter, whom Angelov loudly identified as the disguised son of grocer Dmitry Markelovich, led him out, grumbling, "If you don't have money, why order fruit? It's not on the set menu. Fruit is extra." The cousin, coquettishly wrapped in a cat fur stole with black paws, followed behind, swaying her hips and shrugging ironically. Angelov gleefully shouted after the shamed schoolboy, "Flunker, held back a year, I'll tell your dad, you'll get your benefit show all right." Boredom brought on by the Draffer sisters' act vanished without a trace. Onto the stage glided the famous Mademoiselle Brezina, with shaved armpits and an angelic face. The diva was dressed in ostrich feathers. She didn't sing, didn't tell stories, didn't even dance. She simply strolled around the stage, gazing sweetly at the audience, letting out piercing shrieks, and with the tip of her divine shoe, knocking the wire pince-nez without lenses off the nose of her partner, a colorless, mustachioed gentleman. Angelov and the city architect, a clean-shaven old man, were beside themselves. "Give it all up, it's not enough," Angelov bellowed. "Encore, encore, encore," the architect croaked. City Councilman Charishnikov, struck to the heart by the fairy from the Folies Berger, rose from his table, took aim, and breathing heavily, tossed a quill of streamer onto the stage. It only unrolled halfway and hit the lovely diva on the chin. The fairy smiled even more. Genuine merriment swept the hall. People demanded more champagne. The city architect wept. The landowners eagerly invited the town doctor to join them on a hunting trip. The orchestra struck up a fanfare. At the height of the festivities, loud voices rang out. The orchestra fell silent, and the architect, first to turn toward the entrance, coughed, then started clapping. Into the hall strode the well-known playboy and bon vivant, the county noble leader Ippolit Matveyevich Vorobyaninov, escorting 2 completely naked women by the arm. Behind them came the district police inspector in an overcoat and white gloves, carrying under his arm a bundle of colorful garments, presumably the outfits of Ippolit's now unclothed companions. "Don't ruin me, Your Honor," the inspector pleaded in a trembling voice. "It's my duty." The naked women looked around with innocent curiosity. The hall erupted in chaos. Only Angelov kept his cool. "Buddy Ippolit Matveyevich," he cried, overcome with emotion, "you're a legend, let me kiss you." Orchestra of fanfare. "By duty," the inspector said suddenly, firmly, "the rules don't allow this." "Excuse me," Ippolit Matveyevich asked in a tenor voice, "and who are you?" "District Police Inspector, 6th Precinct, Garden District, Yukon." "Mr. Yukon," Ippolit said sarcastically, "go report to the chief of police that you're bothering me. And now, by duty, write up your report." And with great dignity, Ippolit Matveyevich led his companions to a private room, immediately followed by the anxious Mater D, the owner of Salve himself, and a completely wild-eyed Angelov. This event, which so agitated Stargorod's progressive society, ended as all such events did: a 25-ruble fine and a little article in the local liberal paper, Public Opinion, under the cautious headline, "The Leader's Adventure." The article was written in a lofty style and began, "In our God-fearing city, every event is a sensation." And as if on purpose, every sensation involves influential people. The article, which mentioned Ippolit Matveevich's initials, ended with the inevitable, "There have been worse times, but never more disgraceful ones," and was signed by the city's popular satirist, Prince Danish. That same day, the mayor's special assistant called the paper and, with terrifying politeness, asked Mr. Prince Danish to come to the mayor's office at 4 p.m. for a little chat. Prince Danish immediately fell into a funk and couldn't finish his next column about the suspiciously slow negotiations to lease the city theater to a Moscow operetta troupe. The appointed hour, the celebrated journalist sat in the mayor's waiting room, nervously wondering how he, a stutterer so severe that even Professor Feinstein's course couldn't cure him, would explain himself to the mayor, a hot-tempered man who understood nothing about the newspaper business. The mayor spoke, drawing out his words with contempt and taking special pleasure in staring at Prince Danish's bluish face, as the poor man struggled to get out the impossibly difficult words, "Your Excellency." The conversation ended with the mayor rising from his desk and saying, "For your own good, I recommend you never stutter about such things again." Prince Danish, who by then had finally managed to say, "Your Excellency," hissed especially hard, allowed himself a smile, and nearly turning inside out with effort, squeezed out his reply. "I since and stutter, all the TTT time." Prince's wit came at a price. The paper paid a 100-ruble fine, and from then on, it published nothing about Ippolit Matveevich's adventures. Unpredictable behavior had always been Ippolit Matveevich's trademark. He was born in 1875 in the Stargorod district, on his father Matvey Alexandrovich's estate. Matvey was a passionate pigeon fancier. While his son grew up, suffered childhood illnesses, and formed his first opinions about life, Matvey chased pigeons with a long bamboo pole and in the evenings, wrapped in his robe, wrote a treatise on the varieties and habits of his beloved birds. All the roofs of the estate's buildings were covered in fragile pigeon droppings. Matvey's favorite pigeon, Frederick, and his mate, Manya, lived in a special, well-appointed dovecote. At age 9, Ippolit was enrolled in the prep class of the Stargorod Noble Gymnasium, where he learned that, besides beautiful and pleasant things, like a pencil case, a creaky, fragrant leather satchel, transfer pictures, and the thrill of sliding down the gymnasium's lacquered banisters, there were also ones, twos with a plus, and threes with 2 minuses. He found out he was better than the other boys during the entrance exam in arithmetic. When asked how many apples you'd have if you took 3 from your left pocket and 9 from your right, put them together, and divided by 3, Ippolit said nothing. He couldn't solve it. The examiner was about to give him a failing grade, but his father, sitting at the table with the other examiners, sighed and said, "That's Matvey Alexandrovich's son, a real go-getter." The examiner gave Ippolit a 3, and the spirited boy was admitted. Stargorod had 2 gymnasiums, the noble one and the city one. The noble students had a traditional rivalry with the city kids, calling them pencils, and priding themselves on their caps with red bands, for which they were in turn mockingly called eggplants. More than one pencil had received a martyr's crown of black eyes and bruises from the bloodthirsty eggplants. The angry pencils would ambush lone eggplants and pelt them with long-range slingshots. Lone eggplant, shaking his satchel, would escape down an alley and sit for a long time in some building's entryway, pale and missing a galosh. The captured galosh would be thrown onto the roof of the tallest building the victors could find. There were also cadets in Stargorod, whom the gymnasium boys called boots, but they lived 2 miles out of town in their own barracks and, according to the Mardikins, led a mysterious, almost legendary life. Ippolit envied the cadets, their blue shoulder boards with stenciled yellow Alexander monograms, their badges with attached eagles, but by his father's will was denied a warrior's upbringing. He sat in the gymnasium, got 3s with 2 minuses, and embarked on the wildest adventures. In 3rd grade, Ippolit was held back a year. Once, right before exams, during a long break, 3 boys snuck into the assembly hall and spent a long time admiring the table covered in shiny green cloth, the heavy crimson curtains with tassels, and the tubs of palm trees. Savitsky, a notorious daredevil, gleefully spat into a pot with a ficus. Ippolit and the 3rd boy, Piktav nearly died laughing. "Can you lift the ficus?" Ippolit asked with awe. "Of course," Savitsky replied. "Go on, lift it." Savitsky immediately set to work on the ficus. "You can't do it," Ippolit and Piktav whispered. Savitsky, red-faced and sweaty, kept struggling with the plant. And disaster struck. Savitsky lost his grip on the ficus and crashed backward into a mahogany column with golden grooves, on which stood a marble bust of Alexander I the Blessed. The bust wobbled, the Tsar's blind eyes looked reproachfully at the suddenly silent boys, and after pausing at a 45-degree angle, the Blessed One dove head first like a suicide into a river. The Emperor's fall, though muffled by a Caucasian rug, had dire consequences. A shiny sugar cube-like chunk broke off the face, and the boys, horrified, realized it was the nose. Frozen with fear, they set the bust back in place. Piktav was the first to run. "What'll we do now, Vorobyaninov?" Savitsky asked. "It wasn't me who broke it," Ippolit replied quickly. He left the hall second. Left alone, Savitsky, desperate, tried to reattach the nose. It wouldn't stick, so he went to the bathroom and flushed it down the drain. During Greek class, the principal, Sizek, entered the 3rd grade. He signaled the Greek teacher to stay put and delivered the same speech he'd just given in 5 other classes. the principal had no teeth. "Gentlemen," he declared, who broke the Tsar's bust in the assembly hall. The class was silent. "Confess," the principal barked, spraying the grinds in the front row with spit. The grinds gazed at Cizik with loyal eyes, full of regret that they didn't know the culprit's name. "Confess," the principal repeated. "If the guilty party isn't found within an hour, the whole class will be held back a year. Those already repeating will be expelled." The third grade didn't know Cizik had said the same thing in every class, so his words terrified them. The rest of the lesson was chaos. No one listened to Greek. Ippolit watched Savitsky. "Cizik's lying," Savitsky said sadly. "He's just trying to scare us. He can't hold everyone back." Piktevkakyov sobbed with his head on his desk. "What about us?" the grinds wailed, gazing at the Greek teacher. "Now children, children, children," the Greek pleaded. But the panic only grew. Soon, Piktevkakyov wasn't the only one crying. The desperate grinds were bawling. The bell signaling the end of class rang out amid a storm of despair. Grind Murzik recited the post-lesson prayer, "We thank you, Creator," hiccuping with grief. After class, Savitsky, getting nowhere with the tearful Piktevkakyov, went looking for Ippolit, but he was nowhere to be found. Next day, Savitsky was expelled. Piktevkakyov got a 3 for conduct, with a warning and a call to his parents. His father, a small landowner, arrived in a sleigh pulled by an unshod horse and, after a talk with the principal, dragged his son to the cloakroom and gave him a savage beating in front of a crowd of curious upperclassmen. Piktevkakyov's wails could be heard even outside the city limits. Ippolit kept on studying. His gymnasium years were filled with the usual events and things. He arrived at school in a phaeton with lanterns and a fat coachman who addressed him by his full name. He had the best and most expensive erasers and pencil sharpeners. He always won at feathers because his parents bought him whole boxes of quills, and with such a stockpile he could outlast any opponent. He went home for lunch, which made others jealous, and he was proud of it. By 5th grade, he was already speaking with a slight drawl, which didn't stop him from being held back again. In 6th grade, he smoked his first cigarette. Winter was spent at school balls, where Ippolit, showing off the white silk lining of his uniform, spun through the mazurka and drank rum in the cloakroom. In 7th grade, he struggled with quadratic equations, the devil's staircase, the volume of a pyramid, the parallelogram of velocities, and Ovid's metamorphoses. And in 8th grade, he learned logic, Christian morals, and caught a mild venereal disease. His father had grown very old. The long bamboo pole now trembled in his hands, and the treatise on pigeon breeds was only half finished. Matvey Alexandrovich died before completing it, and Ippolit Matveevich inherited 16 flocks of pigeons, a completely dried-up, parrot-like Frederick, 20,000 rubles a year, and a huge, poorly managed estate. Young Vorobyaninov began his independent life with a brilliantly organized binge, drunken shooting at pigeons, and a roundup of village girls. He considered his education complete. He didn't go to university or into government service. The army was out of the question due to his generally weak health, which was surprising in such a robust-looking man. He remained a gentleman of leisure, a golden fish with his own agenda, an unreliable fiancé, and a natural-born womanizer. He remodeled the family mansion in Stargorod to his own taste, hired a valet with sideburns, 3 footmen, a French chef, whose masterpiece was Burbot filet Vamblyam, and a large staff of kitchen help.